Oh, what's up, guys? This is Team Hard Life Captain Albert Santucci, and I am setting up the channel over here so I can see y'all's comments. Give me just a second. All right. Come on. Dude, skip that. All right, Night Hunter Ray, what's up, guys? How y'all doing? Getting, getting a thumbs up. Roger that. All right. Well, so it says I got 3 thumbs up and only 2 of y'all watching. I don't know how that is. Okay, now 4. There we go. It's catching up. So, uh, how's y'all's weekend going? I have been steady building leaders like crazy. 5 footer, 4 footers, 5 footers, 6 footers, and the big rigs. I've probably built about 200 leaders in the last between yesterday and today. So I'm still on the verge over here working on this. So there you go, Night Hunter. Yep. Let's see. I've got a whole bundle, small bundle of rods or leaders here. probably about probably going to build about 20 of them with just this section right here. What's up, Dave? How you doing? Let's see. Dark Manta, thank you very much, boss. Yep. Actually, I took off about 4 inches last week on it to try to level it off so it wouldn't be so scraggly toward the bottom and stuff like that to keep it even. But I'm putting the 475-pound swivels on this end. The stainless steel, making 6 foot cast and shark leaders. Just waiting on our special guest to come in. So, went ahead and bought a meat hunter. What size of meat hunter was that? Did you get? Uh, been kind of flipping through the movies here on Tubi, uh, watching through there because I was going through Prime and I pretty much went through everything that I wanted to see out of there and stuff, and or that piqued my interest, and then so I started watching Tubi. But every now and then I go to the YouTube channel and I'll pull up videos through there and stuff like that. It's just you gotta watch them because sometimes they're just really bad copies. So I like the ones that look pretty original instead of zooming in and zooming out. So 10 foot meat hunter extreme, is that a solid one piece or is that a two? See, make sure he understands. See if he gets it. Oh man, it's been a crazy day here. Not like crazy busy, just constant. Yeah. Dang it. Kruger Automotive's out on the beach right now. He's kind of giving me a report. I asked him, if he's had any luck. Said he had a real violent cutoff about 4 in the morning. Basically, I mean, something ran into his line and struggled to cut through it, but it finally got through. So, let's see, 2 piece. They don't offer a 800 10 foot one piece. I wish they did. Um, Can't remember what size of meat hunter I had here, but I know I had one. I thought they had 10 footers in the one piece, but I could be mistaken on that, boss. Yeah, I don't remember. It's been a minute since I've had them in the shop, so I know the last one I had in here was a 9 footer. Let's see if it goes. There it goes. All right.
Hey,
Hey,
Albert.
Jason.
How's it
How you doing,
going?
boss? Working.
Awesome.
Yep. So, if you don't mind just introducing yourself and a little background, so that way the guys on the channel can kind of get to know who you are and where you're coming from on this Desal information and stuff like that.
Cool. Yeah, so my name's Jason. Live here in Corpus. I was born here. Basically, I found out about Desal being voted on at City Council a year and a half ago. So I started researching it a whole bunch. I don't know, it's a long story, but yeah, basically I'm just from here. Went to like Ray, went to Del Mar, went to Kingsville, a degree in engineering. And so I just kind of approached it like I approached like classes at school at Kingsville, just kind of read as much about it as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of similar because I went to school for chemical engineering, so it's like a process, right? It's like industrial process. So I just kind of tried to figure out like, if it was going to be a good or a bad idea, because I figured like, I'm going to live here the rest of my life, and if it's going to be a bad project, that's going to cause like headaches, like waste an opposition to it before it got built, So basically, I just had to figure out, if it was going to be a good thing for Corpus or a bad thing for Corpus. And I kind of like studied it for like 6 months, like it was a part-time or full-time job. It was just like reading as much as I could about it, research the group, team.
Here, give me a
Like,
second, boss. I don't know if it's
can you
my
hear me?
phone that's hot.
Yeah,
My phone could be hot. I got a fan on it, but it is pretty hot over here in my shop, so I gotta get the phone to
yeah.
cool a little bit so that way it doesn't distort you. Because sometimes what it'll do is it'll lock up the screen and that'll blur it out like you're talking and it won't hear anything and stuff like that. So
That's great.
basically, you've done a lot of research and everything before you actually decided to step up to the podium to, hey, this is what I know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, basically the first thing I found was like this report from Hodges. Have you heard of Dr. Hodges? He studied hypersaline discharges in the Corpus Christi Bay back in like 2010, and he released a paper about it because basically the Barney Davis power plant, it takes water from the Laguna Madre and discharges it into the Oso Bay. He uses it
Yeah.
for like cooling, and like Laguna Madre is like saltier than Corpus Christi Bay water, right? So it's basically kind of like a desal plant. And so they use that as a proxy to figure out like how hypersaline discharges can cause hypoxia and dissolved oxygen issues. Because in the southeastern part of the Corpus Christi Bay, they have dissolved oxygen issues, usually in like July and August, kind of like late summer.
That's the hotter months kind of deal.
Yeah, and there was a fish kill back in 2006, and that's kind of like, one of the reasons they did that study. And so basically, I found a few papers from him, and I messaged him. I was like, "Is this a bad idea? Like you're like what you're talking about." He said, "Yeah, it's kind of like y'all have to figure out how much environmental degradation y'all are comfortable with. It's like
Yeah. Look, real quick, let me back you up real quick.
yeah,
that big fish kill that we had in the Bay of Corpus Christi, was that part of the death triangle where the brown tide bloom or the algae bloom that was there basically took out all the oxygen from the Bay of Corpus Christi within that area? Because I remember something.
Um,
Go ahead.
that could be something else. The event I'm talking about was in 2006. I don't know if there was like algae problems because it said it was mostly just stratification where it's way saltier at the bottom part of the bay than the top. And
Mm-hmm.
that's mostly because of water from Laguna Madre coming into Corpus Christi Bay and the way it mixes and settles. And then the same thing with the Oso Bay coming into the Corpus Christi Bay. Usually it sinks and then it runs out of oxygen within a day or two, so it's like a little bit further out.
Okay.
But I don't think you mentioned anything about algal blooms or anything like that.
Okay, because I know that was something that was a few years ago. It's been some time since we've had that algae bloom here, but I think that also has a lot to do with the way the currents have been changed up ever since that major hurricane came through, and it basically changed up the Gulf Stream, and that's when instead of Texas getting red tide, Florida started getting red tide, and they've been
Oh,
getting it ever since, every year since then.
wow.
But but also here, the seaweed problem that we have, the sargassum and all of that that's been coming in lately in the last few weeks, we haven't had
Yeah.
that in years too. That
Okay,
normally
wow.
that normally coincides when we get a red tide over here and stuff like that. So this, I hate to say, is going to be a prime example of that desal plant will not be able to function when they have a brown or a red tide in that bay system. Hard life. Sundays we're closed, boss, but on the Saturdays we're here at 9, and on Monday through Friday we're here about 8:15. Yes, sir. You have a good one. Bye bye. So uh, that was one of the stuff that when I went to the TCEQ meeting, I told them about it, and they straight up looked at me. They're like, they looked at each other, and I was like, man, why didn't I like? I wish I had a camera guy to catch their reaction because they had
Yeah,
no freaking idea what the hell I was talking about. But again, too, I'm a fisherman. That's my livelihood. I mean, I deal in making fishing tackle. So people being able to go fish or me knowing where to send people to go fish, to
yeah,
catch fish is important. That is how I make my money. And when I told them
right.
about it, they all got quiet. They were like, for a good minute, and then they kind of looked at each other and they came up. Well, we, yeah. It's like, dude. At that point, I knew they were full of crap. Like they have
Yeah,
not done any research on it and stuff like that. But again, too,
yeah,
like when I was talking to John about everything that he was talking to you about, I was like, man, that's important info for the channel for a lot of the guys that I got a lot of guys from Florida, from the West Coast that are in those areas where the other desal plants they have, one on the actual coast, and then in the Florida it's in the bay system, kind of like what they're trying to do with ours.
yeah,
Um, but again, too, one was up and running when they went to go visit, and then the other one
yeah,
wasn't, but they had just gotten back online. So like we're hearing all the dirty details that they're not sharing with us, like. And I think
right.
that's really important. If they're trying to convince us to come out of pocket for this, that's major. But they're not even giving us the water. It's for they already said it's pre-sold to industry.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it's crazy. Yeah, basically, like if I could sum it up, it's like you said, TCQ doesn't know what they're doing. Basically, no one knows what they're doing. It's kind of like an experiment, and like we don't, we're not getting a say in this, but we're the ones forced to pay for it. And like you said, we're only going to get like 5% of the benefit of it. 95% of the water supply is going to go to industry. So it's kind of
well, I,
crazy to
I
think
wouldn't even say
of.
5% of the benefit because we're paying for it. Then we're going to pay to
Oh yeah,
maintain it. But see, these are the questions that I want answered. Like, what happens when it is not up and running? Because everything in saltwater gets destroyed. They're going to have to shut it down for maintenance. They're going to have to shut it down for all this and that. What
right.
happens on those days that they don't get the water that they need to function? And
Yeah.
what's really making me think about this, you know about the Bob Hall Pier deal, right? So
What about it?
Bob Hall Pier, they're fixing the pier over here, Bob Hall Pier. They're finally getting
Yeah.
up and running. But they
Mhm.
said they told that company if it's not up and running by that date, they're gonna be fined like $1 million a day or $10 million a day, like
That's
stupid money a
cool.
day for a fishing pier. Now, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, I love my pier beyond words. Like I think it's more important than the desal plant,
Yeah.
but these are multi-billion-dollar operations that are not going to be functioning or making money at that time. How much are they going to sue us for?
Oh, like the companies, the
Yeah,
industry,
yeah,
right?
because when they're not getting the water, they can't function those days. So they're
Well,
going to
they'll
be
probably
losing money.
they'll use our reservoir water, right?
Well, we don't know. We don't know. We honest. These are all the questions. Like when it goes down, what's going to happen on those days? Like, do we get buys on those that they don't sue us for not having water, or do they turn around and well, you're not. It's not producing over here, so we're going to take from over here to cause more problems.
Yeah.
You know?
So as far as I know, the water from the desal plant is going to go into our like water infrastructure around the Hillcrest neighborhood, like the Broadway pump station, and it's going to go through like District 2. So if you live in District 2, a lot of your water is going to be the product from the desal plant.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess somehow from there it's going to go to industry because it's too much water for residents to use it all. But I don't know how all that works. But they don't have like a pipeline directly to like Flint Hills or anything like that, you know? So the way I see it is, say like the desal plant is shut down for like half a year during like a drought, like right now, what would happen, right? You know, and I think they would just pull in our reservoirs, and that's kind of crazy. It makes our reservoirs more vulnerable to stuff, you know.
Yeah, this is it was pretty crazy. But I'm gonna say what's up to everybody on the channel. They're kind of all
Yeah.
commenting in real quick. We got Bobby H 900. Um, also saw Daniel Kavanaugh. What's up, boss? How you doing? Oscar Ayala. All right, guys. So I've got Jason here. He's going to be sharing some more information about the desal plant and more of you know the actual knowledge that he has attained from actually doing a lot of research and also too his schooling. Your profession or your background is
Yeah.
pretty much everything they're lying to us about.
Well, I have no professional experience, so I'm just, you know, like for me, school teaches you how to learn. So I just applied everything I learned about, you know, process technology and kind of try to learn as much as I could. And yeah, I wish I could type in. You can't type in links on YouTube, right? Like I've tried it before.
No, no, you can, but I would have to make you a blue wrencher on my channel to be able to do that. Now,
Okay.
what I can do, um, just type in something regularly, and then I can add you as a blue wrencher, so that way you can share those links, so that way these people can go and check those links out and stuff like that, because it's important, for everybody, obviously, get as much knowledge and for you to make your own decision. But again, too, when there's so much opposition from everywhere. I mean, and what gets me more is like they've already denied the desal plant in the back because the EPA, the port pulled out of that one. And
Yeah.
then they're using the Port Aransas jetty, saying that a lot of water, the salt water is going to be coming in from over there to help replenish the water that they're going to be, adding more salinity to. Yet that desal plant failed. The port pulled out of that one too because now they're forcing them
Mhm.
to pump the water way offshore. So hard life.
Super cool.
I might have some there, boss. I would have to go check, but right now I'm live on the channel. Yep. No, they should be the same. Yeah. I got plenty of conos, blackfin tuna. I might have some snapper and some blue runner and some other bait as well for sure. Everything's froze. I'll probably be closing about 6 or 7. Well, definitely, it's already gonna be 6, so probably closer to 7. Roger that. Yes, sir. Bye bye. All right. So sorry about that. I'm the only one here, so I'm
It's all good.
working, and working.
That's perfect. This is like what I do when I'm at my shop because I run a 3D printing business and I have like a workshop over at Way Out Weber, and I have it's like half indoor, half garage, and I'll do a lot of like Zoom meetings, like for like Sierra Club or stuff like that while I'm at work.
Right. Nice. There you go. Well, I know you were gonna start saying something before I got on the phone there.
Right, I forgot what we were talking about.
About how you were doing knowledge, research and trying to apply your knowledge to it, and then
Yeah. Yeah. So like the first thing I looked up was, like California, they have they've been doing like desal for 10 or 20 years, right? So back like in the early 2010s, they came up with this like huge document of like guidelines and recommendations, like basically where you should put your desal plant, where you shouldn't put it, how you should measure it to make sure it's not like screwing up the water around there, stuff like that. And basically, like the inner harbor was like checking off like all the wrong boxes, like red flags, like you
mm,
shouldn't be in a narrow depression, which is what the ship channel is, because it's like 50 feet deep, and then the rest of the day is like 10 feet deep, right?
yeah,
But in that narrow depression, it's like what's going to come in and scoop it out, right? Because there isn't really like strong cross tides that do that, And like you said, I think in another video, it's like the inner harbor plant's like in the armpit of an armpit. There's like not much flow, right? So it's just crazy.
so and that
So what's that?
that that's that's extremely important because again, too, it boils back into, well, there's enough water coming in to compensate for the amount of salinity they're gonna raise it up to, even though it's gonna sit towards the bottom. It's still eventually it's going to move up. It's going to fill in that area and continue to move up and outwards and start filling in the other places like osmosis. I mean, am I wrong on that?
So if the inner harbor isn't like able to like flush it out quick enough, then it'll accumulate towards the bottom. Is kind of like what our institute has said. Let's see. The TM 2.2. So basically, they like, yeah, there isn't enough flushing and mixing in the inner harbor to prevent hypoxia from happening. So basically, like, the city's using a diffuser on their outfall. And are you familiar with that?
Okay,
Diffusers, what's that?
I missed that last portion. You kind of came in.
Okay.
Um,
So in 2016, Heart Research Institute, they did a study for Friesen Nichols, the company who's developing the desal, and they
mm,
looked at 3 different sites: La Quinta, Inner Harbor, and Barney Davis offshore, which is like Flower Bluff. And the conclusion was you shouldn't do a full scale desal plant at La Quinta or Inner Harbor because it will basically accumulate and cause hypoxia. And like, so the city is like, we're using a diffuser, and that's gonna like basically dilute it a whole bunch because it uses turbulent mixing, and that's supposed to get it down to like 5% effluent within 100 feet or whatever. And even Hardy was like, okay, you can have a diffuser on there, but the inner harbor is still like so poorly flushed that it's just gonna resettle towards the bottom and just kind of linger there, you know.
yeah. Good.
So it's just great because I'll literally hand that over to a city council member, and then like they're like, oh, we trust whatever people we pay tell us, you know.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Because you're paying them to tell you exactly what you want to hear.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
yeah, you're paying them, so you trust what they're saying because you're paying them, right? You know. So,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah,
That was cool on the. What's that?
they definitely need to bring in people that have no
For sure.
skin in the game. Basically, they're going to
Yeah.
tell you straight up, "Hey, no, that's wrong." That a strict third party company to come in and say, "Hey, y'all are going to do some damage to this area if y'all really put it in." But it's amazing that the EPA was basically backed off the deal because they're nowhere to be seen on this deal. But they were in the original one, and then they were in the one in the Port 8 deal. So where are they now?
Where are they now? I don't know. That's a good question. I did talk to someone that was in the previous EPA administration, like last year and the year before, that worked on this, and they said that there wasn't enough information from the city as far as like modeling and environmental impact to actually object to the permit for the discharge.
Uh,
And like they didn't approve, they didn't like give it a check mark or their seal of approval. They just didn't object. And the person I talked to basically said it's because they didn't have enough information. And like the people on their team didn't do like hydrodynamic modeling for this kind of stuff, you know? So basically they were unequipped and they didn't have enough information. And then the person also said that basically it came down from the top that this was not going to get opposed. And there's speculation that maybe it's because the Biden administration was trying to push hydrogen, like green hydrogen, and we needed water to make that because basically that's the feedstock for green hydrogen, you know?
so this is all. Yeah, it was during the Biden administration when they went up to Washington D.C. to get the EPA to back down to do that.
Yeah.
Well, now Trump's there. That should be a whole different program now. Like maybe these guys that were all about wasteful spending aren't there anymore, and maybe we can get them to relook at this deal. But um, wow, mm-hmm. I'm. It's amazing the amount of distrust that we have within our own city council when the everything is being proven to them right then and there, and they're just blatantly ignoring everything we're asking them. We told them to put it up for a vote, and they're choosing not to and choosing to do their own thing. Oh, well, we're paying these guys. Well, yeah, of course they want it to happen because they're the ones that are going to be creating the desal plant. Like, I don't understand that.
Yeah, it's crazy how it works out, but all that stuff's really expensive, so it's kind of hard to get like someone independent to look at it, you know?
Well, they didn't somebody get a one company that said that they could do the far field modeling for like it was like 30K or 15K, something like that.
Yeah, there was a LRE. They did the modeling for the Ports Harbor Island project,
Uh-huh.
and basically last year they had created a whole hydrodynamic model for the Corpus Christi Bay system. So it's like Gulf of Mexico, Nueces Bay, Lagoon Madre, and Ann Harbor was on there, and it showed concerning results, but it wasn't like set up perfectly. It was just kind of like quickly set up, and so it didn't capture some of the dynamics of how the salt would be discharged into the harbor. But yeah, he offered to kind of like spruce it up and kind of like focus on the inner harbor for I think around $30,000. And it's like 2 months, 3 months, something like that. Like 45,000 to do it in a month.
Wow.
So it's
So
probably a little cheaper than what GHD is doing. Um, or if they did something similar, how much it would cost.
the so basically what it's coming down to is they're not allowing the information to be gathered and be able to be used to create concrete evidence to basically say, okay, yeah, this is going to mess up the bay or not going to mess up the bay. They're just trying to push it through. And if it happens to mess up the bay, then, oh, okay, then we messed up. Like,
Yeah.
but it's already, we've already done paid for it all. And, to sit there and abandon it all would be extremely costly because then, obviously they would have already pre-sold all that water. So those companies are still going to be expecting it no matter what's going on within here in the city and stuff like that.
Yeah, it would be a nightmare. I think if it was really bad, they would have to build an offshore pipe from Inner Harbor all the way out to the Gulf, which would be like 15 or 20 miles, right? So that'd be super expensive because those pipelines are like really expensive.
Well, for that's why these companies are the ones who need to build it because they have the money to make it happen. It should be on their dime that it gets done, not ours, especially if it's not set up to help us at all. I mean, granted, we're going to be selling them the water, but they ain't even said where the proceeds of those water sales are going to go. Like, is it going to completely offset the cost of what the desal plant is going to be cost to maintain, to function, to work? Like, if it is, well, then okay, if they do it, then they're paying for it all, but also, too, pump that
Right.
trash offshore, but
Yeah.
no sludge. That's the part that really gets me. Like, how are they okaying 3 million gallons of sludge per day to be pumped into the water? Like,
Well, they say it's not sludge. They say it's dewatered solids. So it's just the water that they removed from the solids. Because that's part of the pre-treatment process is to kind of get rid of the gunk and then dehydrate it and then truck off the dry gunk and then discharge the dewatered stuff,
well,
which
I
could be sludgy. I don't know.
I
They said,
read the paperwork and it said like 30 million gallons or 50 million gallons of brine
yeah,
plus 3 million gallons of sludge was the word sludge, not
right,
recarbonated, whatever you want to call it,
right.
some technical term. They said sludge. So sludge to me is the stuff that clogs up your engines that don't let it run properly and will
Yeah.
kill everything in the bay. I
And
mean,
so they say, well, we took it out of the bay. So what's the harm in putting it back into the bay, right? That's their kind of like counterpoint there. So as far as like who's paying for the plant, the way I understand it is that basically industry uses about, let's say, 60% of the water that CCW sells, and residents and businesses use about 40%. So the $2 billion that the plant is going to cost over the next 20 years will basically be split up by that ratio. The industry using 70% of CCW's water. Once desal comes in, they're going to be paying for 70% of that water cost, in theory. But that means they'll only be paying 30%. But the problem is, right now they're suing the city to have a lower water rate because last year we pretty much hard. We were charging them $4 1,000 gallons. Prior to that, we were charging them like $2 1,000 gallons, and we were like losing money on that. So we charged them how much it's costing us, but it was such a rate shock for them that they're suing the city, and now they're going to get a lower price for that year, and the residents are going to have to make up that difference. So it's
yeah,
like, in theory, they should be paying for most of the plant, but they're going to fight tooth and nail to pay the least amount necessary. So,
oh yeah, that's how the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor. Like
yeah,
they're taking this to court and doing all of this, but and that's how they stay rich. They are forcing us to pay for them to conduct their business and make their money. But again,
that's
too,
a
if I
huge way
try
to
to
do
tell them, hey man, I want tax reductions. I've been here for 10 years. Like I should be able to pay
it. Right.
less on my taxes because I've been here. I guarantee. No, no, like
Yeah.
you know. But the one thing that would get me, and I by all means, but I have a lot of guys that are uh, customers, that work for the wastewater plant. Like, I don't mean this in a derogatory kind of way, because more than likely, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes of
For
where
sure.
they work and how they work. I've been with businesses where they always try to cut corners, try to save money, and it forces you to do things that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
So when I hear when we're hearing that all this stuff is wrong with our current infrastructure for water here in the city, but you're going to put those same people in charge of the desal plant, has me really freaking worried, because if there's so much fines that are happening here on the current infrastructure that's been here forever, what kind of fines do you think we're going to have once they're in charge of that kind of deal? And these are all things that are just running through my head, and from all the information that's coming out between you, Jason, or you, John, and Rachel. You know what I mean? But again, too, they're also putting it out in public. That YouTube video, he's like, "Oh yeah, well, we've already kind of pre-sold, X amount of gallons to industry, in relation to this."
Yeah.
Bro,
Well, you kind of have to in a way, because like it's such expensive water. You have to sell it all in order to keep the cost per unit low, right? So,
I can totally understand that, but at the same time,
yeah.
if they're not charging them enough to totally
Yeah.
offset that cost, because they're the ones getting the water, we're not. At the end of the
Right.
day,
Okay. So there.
3% of the 100% is not worth me raising my taxes 25% to pay for that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Right
it's
now,
crazy.
the estimate for an average water customer is that Inner Harbor will raise your bill $120 higher a year. So it's like $10 extra a month. That's if you use 6,000 gallons a month. And that's if everything goes right. And that's if like industry doesn't sue the city for a lower rate, and assuming it's all sold too. So it's crazy. And for me, it's just like, okay, we need water. Sure, let's get a water plant. But I don't think we need like a new desal plant for 3 to 5 years. That sounds like
Well, I
there's enough
know,
water.
we definitely need to set something up to help the city. Fixing the infrastructure is probably
Yeah,
the main one right there, because then they can figure out where all this loss of water is going. Because it is crazy the amount of water that's being lost per year, and they have no idea how it's being lost, or they do and they're just plain stupid. One of the two. Uh, it like they've even said, we have received 90%, 95% of the water we normally get per year. Yet we're in extreme drought conditions, because I honestly feel they've already oversold it, and that's why it's doing what it's doing. Like, all these industries are pulling out all their water, because that's what they were promised or sold.
right. Yeah, I don't know if I believe that. Like, so after I learned as much as I could about the Inner Harbor plant, I started learning about water use and like water, I guess, like how much water we get a year, and stuff like that. Who uses how much water? And from what I can tell, like if you look at the USGS stream flow gauges that measure how much water goes into our reservoirs, we basically haven't had like an average inflow since like 2019. To me, I feel like we're on a 6 year, 7 year drought, and that's the main reason we're in this problem. But also, we've sold a lot of water to industry; they don't conserve. And another one that people don't really talk about is like Mary Roads Pipeline. You know how this year just got upgraded to transfer 77 million gallons a day, and prior to that it was like 45 or something like that, 50. Well,
I,
that pipeline, the phase two, is the Colorado River, and that went online in 2017, but it only delivered a fifth of what it was supposed to up until this year. So that's still 100 million gallons, or 100,000 acre feet we could have had in our reservoirs, but they just waited till this year to complete like the pump upgrades to use that much water. And it's like, I asked them about it, and they said that's because they didn't have any customers for it. And then, like, the main customer that came online since that water supply went online was Gulf Coast Growth Ventures, and they use 13 million gallons a day. They went online in 2022/2023, and we still weren't using the full capacity of Mary Rose pipeline. Like, that should have been upgraded 5 years ago. And had we have done that, our reservoir would have been at the level it's at a year ago right now. That would be like 100,000 acre feet more in the reservoir, which is, we lost 100,000 acre feet over the past year in our reservoirs, which is like a crazy amount of water, because we use 130,000 acre feet a year, or we did in 2023. So,
How much has that usage of acre foot increased per year?
what's that?
Has it? Has that acre footage of usage increased per year in the last 4 years or 5?
Yeah,
Or is it
so
still?
I think it was around 110 for a few years, and then it kind of ramped up to 120. I'd say over 5 years. I can look it up. So like, there's a bunch of tools on Texas Water Development Board website where you can track water use, and one of the ones that I look at a lot is the intake that CCW took in over the past like 10 years. And so it's like how much they got from like Choke Canyon, how much they got from Lake Corpus Christi, how much they got from Lake Texana and Colorado River. You make me a Blue Ridge, I can paste this in here if anyone wants to check it out.
Hold on real quick. I got to step to the back real quick because I'm out of hooks here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But again, I'd like to be able to give you the opportunity to share those links. But what I need you to do is comment on the channel so that way I can make you a blueprint so that we can share that information so everybody else can do their own research and check it out. But again, too,
Yeah.
a lot of what is going on, it's hard to do that. Oh, Jason Hill?
Yep, that's me.
Okay.
Yeah, like my whole thing is just collecting resources because like I have to back everything up I say with receipts, you know? So, and I like being able to share them and people to like kind of verify the information for themselves.
Comment again real quick, or
Yeah.
type in again. All right, I have 2.7 millimeter crimp. Can I use my 2.2 crimper? No, it will not cut them, but what it does is it gives you too much gap between your cable and mono. If you're using those sleeves, you're creating a lot of gap there, and what it ends up doing is it'll make your sleeves a lot weaker. I actually did that about 12 years ago, and what we found out was the crimp was over crimping. So after a while, they just fell apart. The crimp would fall apart. So you want a crimp that kind of gets to the locking point quickly, not where you have to over crimp it to get it to lock into that same position. So, but that spreadsheet that link you just shared, what is that for?
Okay, so this is the intake that CCW took in over the past 10 years. And it's got a link to the source on one of the tabs because it's a lot of information you got to like sift through. But yeah, it shows like how much water we took in from 2015 to 2023. So like in 2018, we were taking in 100 billion gallons a day, and then 5 years later, we're taking in 119 million gallons a day. So that's a 20% increase within 5 years, and that's probably mostly due to industry. Mostly Gulf Coast, probably.
All right, let me go get these hooks real quick, boss.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Think they make leaders without the hooks. Oh man, what a day! What was I gonna say? I know there was some information that you had that you had shared with the city um, about the desal plant, and uh, it was like pertinent information for them to understand and know, and yet they kind of are still just blatantly ignoring everything.
Yeah, was it like last month or before that?
I know there's been a few times you've gone up there because I don't watch them all, but when Rachel kind of gives me a heads up, hey, they're talking about the desal or whatever, I try my
That's
best to
cool.
get on there and through the channel we've actually shared multiple times to let people know, hey man, go sign up. And even if you can't speak, the rest of us will let them know. The reason why all these names are being called is because they're paying attention to what y'all are doing. So that way, when it comes time to voting, we can vote y'all's crooks ass out. Excuse my language, but it's to that point. Like we have to pay attention to what these guys are doing because if we don't, they can do whatever the hell they want, and then we're screwed at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, we really need to stay on top of them because they'll just let whatever whoever they pay, whatever they want to do, they'll just go for that, you know. So the last thing I brought up was GHD. They had sent like a memo to Brett Van Hazel, who's the dude that's kind of like running or managing the development of the Inner Harbor for Corpus. And basically, GHD was kind of talking about all the far field modeling or modeling that they could do for the Inner Harbor. And basically, they said they could do everything that we wanted if City Council required them to do that. And so I was making sure City Council was aware of that because I don't think, anyone really from council saw that. That was mostly just like DPW. So their response to that was like, oh, well, Kiewit doesn't think we need to do like a bay-wide model. They just want to do the Inner Harbor water segment, from like the dead end of the channel to the Harbor Bridge, basically, or to Lexington. Which is crazy to me because it's like, okay, well, once it gets there, then how does it get out of the bay, right? Because the bay has its own circulation. It's different throughout the year, and so it's great that it made it to the bay, but how long is it going to take to get out? And basically, they just assume like it's going to be a 0.3 parts per thousand increase for the bay, throughout the whole day.
That's how. Gosh, that's like that's basically saying that they're only interested in what happens in the inner harbor and not what happens outside the bay because that's out of their jurisdiction, basically.
Yeah, Kiewit wants to make sure that they cover their ass and that the discharge like isn't insanely terrible right off the get go, But basically, whatever happens beyond, the inner harbor, they don't really care about. And to me, I don't know. I feel like how do you know, like when water leaves the inner harbor, like say the last hour of a tide, who's to say it doesn't come back on the returning tide, And it's like, what assumptions are they using at that interface where they're saying, this is where the model stops and this is the exchange with Corpus Christi Bay. It's like, I would like to know what they use for that and why they calculate that number. Because from what I've seen, a lot of interfaces like that have a tidal exchange ratio of like 25%. So basically, like 75% of the water that leaves on one tide comes back on the next tide. Something like that. It's
You
not
know,
100% effective, where it just disappears once it leaves.
you know the very important topic right there because they are so concerned with the whole Bay of Corpus Christi and this and that. Yet why aren't they not? I mean, and I know you can't answer this, but just hypothetically, like why are they not totally interested in what happens out of there? Well, because then that's going to shut them down. Because then they're
Yeah.
going to be destroying all these habitats for all these endangered. We got a bunch of endangered species in our bay. Like we got a bunch of protected areas in our bay. We got a lot of breeding grounds, for oysters, for shrimp, for crab, for everything out there. And once they know they start getting into those areas, those wetlands and all of that, it's going to be trashed out. And then what happens at that point? Who's going to be responsible for fixing that ecological disaster?
And like, how are they going to monitor that that doesn't happen, right? Like right
Yeah,
now, the monitoring plan is to like check 4 spots 4 times a year, and that's it for 5 years, and that's it. You know, that's crazy.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It,
for
it
me, it's like, I think most of the effects will be close to the like Lexington, and in the Nueces Bay, because the Nueces Bay is connected to the Inner Harbor with the power plant. And that's the one I'm kind of most concerned about because that's like the breeding grounds area. A lot of like nursery, juvenile fish kind of stuff happening
yep.
there. Yeah, it's kind of concerning.
The one thing that I always think about, and it always happens when you have a busted water main under your ground and your anywhere you look at it, the main channel runs, and it runs clear. Any debris that's mixed in there, after a while it starts to run clear, and all the sedimentation goes off to the right and left side of the main channel. So who's
Uh-huh.
to say that that doesn't happen with that salinity? Like once it gets far enough away, it just starts going to where there's no more current, and it starts building up on the sides
Okay.
where the
Yeah.
the clean water keeps running through the middle. You see
Right.
it
Right.
in nature every single day. Like, why is it not going to? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking outside the box, but is that something that could happen with the amount of salinity that they're pushing out? That it goes so far and then it starts getting pushed off to the sides of lesser current areas.
Well, if it's a negatively buoyant, like uh, like the brine concentrate's heavier, so you would think it would kind of go where the sediment goes a little bit, right? Because that kind of sinks to the bottom too. So that sounds right. And like in a channel, there's a lot of flow in the middle, and it pushes out the heavier stuff towards the sides. Is what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds right.
yeah.
And it's where like everything's at, right? The shallower shoreline areas.
Exactly. All of the Bay, Corpus Christi, all the way up. And I honestly don't believe, I really don't. I mean, that it's going to be offset by the amount of water that's coming in through the Port A jetties. It's too far away for it to make a direct impact on it. But that's what they keep saying. Like, there's enough water inflow and outflow that it's going to mix it, just right. And,
Right,
going to raise it a little bit, but not enough to endanger any species of animals in there. Well, if
right.
you're that positive, well then why don't you do a far field model?
Yeah,
Prove us
totally.
wrong.
Yeah, prove us wrong. You're putting us on the hook for this, so just at least do this one thing. Just
Yeah, yeah,
say that we didn't need it. These city lawyers are like, you know,
yeah. It's getting pretty crazy out there. Um, but I do appreciate your time. But I think the phone. I mean, I've got the fan here, but I think it's still starting to glitch a little bit more and stuff like that.
that's cool.
I wanted to bring on Easy because he's doing. He's still doing a little fundraiser to try to get his truck up in order. But again, Jason, I'd like to bring you on some more, but
Yeah,
obviously I need to get this phone deal corrected so that way we get a better lineup of that. And I'll
that's
I'll
cool.
actually try to focus my efforts on having a better questioning and stuff like that
Okay.
for you. And I'll get it over so we can have it all lined up instead of, right now it's just kind of spitballing, trying to get to know who you are and the knowledge you do have and stuff like that. And like I said, I've seen your post up during the community portion where we can go up there and talk and share our knowledge and stuff like that. So it's been a while trying to get to you and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
we're here now. So you got my number. And again, whenever you have any kind of information like that, I have an email for the YouTube channel. It's called teamhardlife1@gmail.com. And that's where everybody's been sending me like all the information about the desal plants and stuff like that. And so that way, because we know the news ain't covering it the way they need to be covering it. So
Yeah.
we're kind of on our own to go out there and take care of ourselves. So if you find any information like that, send it to me, and I'll as soon as I can get it posted up, I'll post it up and make everybody more aware of what's going on for sure.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I'll talk to you
Roger that.
later.
Yeah,
Cool
you
day.
have a good weekend, boss.
You too.
All right. All right, guys. So I got Easy. Let me see if he's still available. Give me a second. Uh, I don't know how much longer the phone's going to go because there's. Let's see. Come on. All right, guys. It's not letting me. Um, I don't know. Let me see what I can do, guys. But this is starting. I'm starting to see my screen stall out. I don't know if it's doing anything on the phone over here as well. But I will holler at y'all later, guys. Y'all have a good one.